Board meeting this Wednesday, May 18th, 2016. First item on our agenda is a roll call. Tonight we have Lisa Buck, we have Krista Swincer, we have Judd McIntosh, we've got Jeremy Chubbuck, myself, Phil Ruck, and we've got Michael Costello down at the end. Next item is acceptance of the agenda.
So moved.
Very good. Have a second? Second. Any discussion, additions, comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the agenda as presented?
Phil, you need to designate Michael.
Michael, I designate you as a voting member this evening. Thanks, Ruth. Next up, approval of the minutes of last month, April 27th, 2016.
I move approval of the minutes.
Okay, we have a second. Discussion, comments, edits. Ruth, your usual stellar job. I only have one. Sorry, Ruth, I've got to make one comment on your way out the door. So.
Yeah, I know. It's your last chance.
Yeah, page 4. I don't know, is it, Phil Ruck felt it was a bad precedence to set, or a precedent? I don't know if it
Where are you?
Page 4.
Okay.
1, 2, 3, the 4th
Yes, you're right.
section. All I got, Ruth.
Okay.
Any other? I guess hearing none, with that change, all those in favor of the minutes? Very good, thank you. Next up, we have, we got 4 public hearings this evening. First one up is an amended site plan review request by Independence Advocates of Maine, Inc., who wish to construct an addition to their existing facility located at 2 Hillside Road, tax map 20-3, lot 59 in the C2 zone. Before we get going, I will be recusing myself for this application and stepping down. Judd, do you mind chairing?
I would love to.
What a guy.
All right, so just to refresh my memory, since it's been 2 months, we're going to get the intro from you, Evan?
Typically, the first step is to have the applicant give an overview of the plan, give the board a chance to ask questions of that, and then I can provide a summary, and then you open the public hearing for comments.
Sounds great. The applicant.
Good evening, I'm Sean Thies with CES Engineers representing the applicant tonight. Also here is Catherine Robertson, the Executive Director for Independent Advocates of Maine, and also their board president. So they'll be able to hopefully answer any questions that you may have regarding the facility, but I'll give you an overview of what the project is. The existing facility was built in around 1979, and it's they've sort of outgrown their space. They're quite restricted in there for, not that they want to grow the number of residents that they have, but mainly expand some of the living space and the administration and services that are inside the building. This is a intermediate care facility, residential care for people with extreme disabilities, both physical and mental disabilities. As you can see sort of on the plan, the existing building, it's shaped sort of like a capital E, and each of the 3, I call them, they're designated as houses, 3 houses on the, I'd say essentially the southeast part. There's one here, one in the middle, and one on the end. Those are the residential spaces. They have approximately 15 beds total in those 3 wings, where in each wing has bedroom space with a common living space and bathrooms. And then sort of the long piece of the existing building is where they have the administration areas, kitchen facilities, laundry, and that type of things. So the proposal is to add 2 additions onto the building, one in this area here and one on the corner over here. One's roughly 2,800 square feet and the other one is approximately 3,000 square feet. And then also off to the side, a 900 square foot garage for storage space and things like that. The additions will be used to expand the administration, essentially, the administration area is essentially up in this corner, conference room space, office space, and the bottom area would allow an expansion of the kitchen and those facilities, service type areas. As part of this project, the rest of the existing building, it's essentially a complete renovation of the existing structure. It'll allow them to expand those residential areas more into some of the existing space by moving their admin and kitchen areas into the new areas of the site. Other than the building expansions or additions, proposing a change to the parking layout. Currently, the driveway comes up, there's a parking area on this side of the building for their vans and shuttle buses. And on the back side, there's currently sort of a big loop that comes around with parking along the exterior of that loop. That'll all be removed and the parking lot is as shown here with a center aisle and parking on both sides would replace the existing parking. In total, it adds roughly 12 new spaces to the property, and the overall, between the parking revisions, the building additions, removal of existing pavement in some areas, it adds a little over 8,000 square feet of new impervious area to the site. We're proposing to handle stormwater through the construction of a under-drain soil filter right over in that corner. There's a high point in this proposed parking lot right in here. So all this new parking will drain over to that under-drain soil filter along with a portion of the road here and some of the roof area from this building. So we're treating approximately 10,000 square feet of impervious surface. So that the treatment that we're providing, it's more than what the new impervious areas that we're adding. So that should address any concerns with runoff, both quantity and quality. All the existing utility services that come into the building, those will all be reused. So all the plumbing work or service work is all inside the building or in the basement areas. And there's no new traffic or traffic increases, no increase in employees or residents. So, be happy to answer any questions that the board has.
So one of our issues was erosion control, but it looks like it was added after the fact?
It was, and perhaps Sean can address that.
Yes, after we had submitted our final submission, Evan noted that we didn't include an erosion control plan. So we've included a narrative plan that addresses erosion control, and we also revised the site plan and the detail sheet to add erosion control notes and erosion control measures on the site plan.
Mandy has not seen this, or you indicated that you felt like she should approve this, or?
She saw the original plan. She did not see the erosion control plan, but I think this is a standard plan of the type that she would advise.
Okay, thanks.
And just to make clear, I assume that could you point out how the drainage is actually going to work? That part of the drainage that's going to be directed toward the filter, and that part which is going to be directed towards a reshaped swale around to Hillside?
Sure. So currently there's a high spot essentially in the center of this back parking lot where water is directed either westerly direction or off to the east. There's a swale that runs around this side of the property and down, which continues on through a culvert. I think it's actually two culverts. There's a separate access. I think it's emergency access for Orchard Trails. Potentially it's a gated road through here. So So there's a culvert under there and another culvert under Hillside where the water all discharges. And similarly, on this side, it comes around the property line. On this edge of the property is an existing stream, so all the water gets down through the woods to that stream and eventually goes down and crosses the road as well. So we're essentially maintaining that same high spot. It may be shifted slightly to the east a little bit. So the water on this half will continue to flow to the east. We have to revise some of the grading for the swale to get it to go out around this addition, but once it's there, it'll continue on in that same sort of fashion that it does now down that side. And then the side here where it all goes to the proposed under-drain soil filter, we have an overflow structure in that filter, and all the under-drain from that filter is piped over to an existing catch basin structure, which is then piped down in outlets near the stream. So that catch basin and that outlet pipe is all there today. We are proposing to replace the pipe because it's in bad shape, but we're not necessarily redirecting or changing the flow paths from where the water goes now to where it's expected to go. And I guess I didn't mention the revision to this side of the building, but so the parking lot that's there now will come out. We have essentially it's a drop-off pickup area for the residents. There's not an enclosed structure, but a roofed structure here, so when they bring the residents out in wheelchairs and such, they can have them undercover when it's inclement weather. And then there's a few parking spaces here for their vans and buses.
Does anyone else have any questions on the board? All right, Evan, you want to?
Yes. Sean's done a pretty good job of explaining the project, so I won't go through all those details. Again, for context, this was built, a facility was built in 1979, and at the time, it was probably about a 50% larger lot than it is today. 2003, the southeastern portion of the lot was sold off to, for the purpose of a single-family home. It is located there now, so it is now a 2.9 acre site. The dividing line between the two properties is a stream, and it's a year-round stream. The water's flowing all year, but it's a small stream. It's not large enough to be part of the shoreline zoning system and so forth. But it's something that we want to make sure we looked at in terms of the additional flows, if there are any flows. But as you can see on the plan, and maybe Sean can point it out, there is not too much intrusion on the existing wooded area. There is, between the development and the paved area, the driveway and the parking and so forth, and the proposed new garage and that stream, there remains a fairly wide wooded buffer area. The only place it comes close is down towards the entrance into the facility. Around those you'll see three proposed parking spaces on the widened access road as near the beginning. And you can see that the grading comes down close to the boundary line of the property, which is the stream. Now drainage will have been largely captured before that, and so in pipes, but we might hear from Sean about a little bit more about how that might be stabilized and vegetated and so forth. I think the erosion control plan addresses it, but you might want some clarity on that. Because this project is adding impervious area, but it's also subtracting impervious area. It's converting much of the front parking lot into a landscaped area, and so there's the net addition of impervious areas is modest, only in the realm of 4,400 square
Around
feet.
8,000.
Around 8,000 square feet. And Mandy has looked at that and agrees that does not add, the under drain that they're putting in will treat a larger impervious area than they're adding. So there is probably a net gain in stormwater quality as a result of that. Utilities, a number of the pieces of utility infrastructure are being replaced. You can see in on the plan, storm lines are being replaced. The water line is remaining as it is. I think the sewer line is remaining as is. It's all being handled from the existing internal system. So primarily it's the storm drain lines that are being replaced to accommodate the flow into and out of the basin. There's a lighting plan that was submitted, and it shows that all of there will be no overflow glare. The neighbor on three sides of this is Orchard Trails Apartments, and on a substantial part of that boundary is in the open space area of the Orchard Trails plan, the required open space as part of that cluster development. So in any case, there is no spillover of lighting, and there are no buffering or setback issues that we identified. I don't think any new signs are proposed. There is, you'll see, proposed new dumpsters. They appear to be properly located and screened. And financial capacity, they have submitted letter of loan support from the appropriate federal agency that works with their agency. They have, as noted, now submitted an erosion control plan. The erosion control plan calls for permanent planting of the swales, the graded areas that they are proposing to do, and so I think we have no other concerns or issues. I will say that just by way of context, and they've got a map in the booklet. This earlier after. Sorry, it's a drawing that shows this drawing with a lot of turquoise blue on it. It shows the surrounding wetlands and vernal pools. We knew from our aerial imagery on hand that there were vernal pools in the vicinity, and we just wanted to understand the relationship of this development to those vernal pools and wetlands. And as you can see, they are a couple properties over, and in any case don't affect, regulatorily don't affect this site. And there does remain good wooded buffer between, in any case, this development and the vernal pools, which are within 250 feet, but on other properties, not theirs. So with that, that completes my review. I think perhaps Sean would just say a word about some of the vegetation on that grading that's going to happen right on the stream bank or right near the stream bank.
Yeah, so all the silt fence will be in place around all the edges of the downslope grading, and then all slopes will be seeded, mulched. Silt fence will remain in place until that's all the slopes are stabilized, and there's very minimal runoff in those areas to create potential erosion problems.
Final thing that I should have said is that Fire Marshal Henry Vaughn reviewed the plan and has no issues, no problems with it. So the water supply continues to be adequate for this increased volume of building.
Thank you, Evan. All right, I'm going to open the public hearing now. Pretend I have a gavel. Public hearing's open. Would anyone like to come up, make a comment? No. We'll leave it open for now. Next steps is there any discussion?
John, I have one question. What's the time frame on construction of this? What season are we looking at construction this in?
They want to start construction in September of this year and work through, I believe it is supposed to be complete in early 2018. April 2018. So it seems like it's a very difficult phasing project to keep all the people in the building and essentially rebuild the houses that they're living in while they're there. So that's the time frame that we're looking at.
Mr. Chair, could I get one clarification, just a small clarification? In places, I think I see references to 17 beds. In other places, to 15 beds. Is it accurate to say it's a 17-bed facility? 2 of the beds are for emergencies or spillovers or that sort of thing?
I believe they're licensed for 17 beds, but there's only 15 residents there.
We're licensed for 17, and we've been maintaining between 15 and 16 based on space. We could have 17. There isn't a difference in the beds.
Any other comments or questions? All right, I'm going to close the public hearing. Given the fact that they have the erosion control plan, but Mandy hasn't reviewed it yet, should we leave, if we were to approve it, that recommendation in place?
Sure, you may say that, that as part of a pre-construction conference with the contractor, she needs to approve the erosion control plan. That could be a condition.
Just leave it as is, so to speak?
Sure.
Well,
yes.
well, I have to change the word a little bit, obviously.
Yeah, they've provided the plan, it just needs to be reviewed by the town engineer, and it's a very standard and adequate plan, so I'm sure that's okay, but it's good for her to put her eyes on it.
All right. It's motion time.
No, findings of fact.
Findings of fact, oh, I was trying to skip that.
Don't want to read it?
I need water. Yep,
There's some back.
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you. All right, I'm going to read into the record the proposed findings of fact. Independence Advocates of Maine Incorporated, site plan review, Treats Falls House expansion, May 18, 2016. Pursuant to Article 6, Section 18-177 of the Orono Code of Ordinances, the Orono Planning Board has considered the application of Independence Advocates of Maine Incorporated for the site plan approval to expand Treats Falls House, an intermediate care facility for persons with intellectual disabilities at 2 Hillside Road. The property is identified as tax map 20-3, lot 59 in the commercial C2, commercial 2 district. Based on all evidence presented by the applicant, reviewing agencies, town departments, and the public, the planning board has found the following. Number 1, requirements of the district. That the proposed use is permitted in the commercial 2 district with site plan approval and conforms to the dimensional requirement of the district. Number 2, right title or interest, that the applicant has title to the property subject to a sewer easement granted to the town of Orono, and further that the current 2.9 acre lot is a portion of a larger property that existed in 1979 when Treat Falls House was originally built, but was divided in 2003 when a southwestern section of the property was sold. Number 3, compliance with town ordinances and codes, that the proposal does or is able to comply with the town ordinances and codes. Number 4, utilization of the site, that the site is already developed with a 17-bed intermediate care facility, related access road and parking, and that the expansion, which will consist of 2 one-story attached spaces totaling 5,800 square feet for kitchen and administrative uses, a 900 square foot freestanding garage for storage purposes, and modified parking is primarily within the existing developed envelope of the site. Number 5, traffic, parking, and pedestrian access, that the expansion will not change existing access to the site at northeastern end of Hillside Road and will not significantly affect traffic volumes or patterns. B, that the modified internal traffic circulation provision for a shelter for a van pickup and drop-off and off-street parking areas meet the standards of the Land Use Ordinance and are appropriately located within the site. And C, that the adequate provision has been made for pedestrian circulation within the site. Item number 6, storage of materials, that there will be no exposed non-residential storage on the site. Item number 7, stormwater management and erosion control, that the expansion of the facility will increase the impervious area of the site by approximately 8,046 square feet, will not alter the overall existing drainage pattern, will utilize existing off-site drainage infrastructure without overloading them, and that through installation of an under-drained soil filter will treat stormwater from more impervious area that is being added, resulting in a net improvement in stormwater quality. Further, that the appropriate measures have been included in the plan to control the erosion and sedimentation during and after site work. Number 8, water supply and sewage disposal and other utilities, that the site will continue to be served by public water supply, sewage disposal, and electrical utilities, and that these are adequate to serve the proposed uses, including fire protection. Number 9, natural features, water quality, shorelands, and flood zone, that the redevelopment of the site will not significantly alter natural features of the site, will not have an undue adverse effect on water quality, will not affect wildlife resources, and is not located in a shoreline area or flood zone. Number 10, hazardous, special, and radioactive materials, petroleum products, that the proposed use will not generate hazardous, special, or radioactive materials or waste. Number 11, solid waste management, that municipal solid waste generated within the facility will not significantly change as a result of the proposed expansion, and that proposed on-site storage of solid waste is appropriately located and screened. Number 12, historic and archaeological resources, that the proposed use of the property does not affect known historic or archaeological resources. Number 13, financial capacity, that the applicant has the technical and financial capacity to complete the project according to all local, state, federal standards. Number 14, signs, that no new signage is proposed as part of the expansion. And finally, number 15, noise and lighting, that the external lighting will be in locations and of a design that will prevent the spillover of light and glare beyond the project's property lines, and that the use of the property can be operated to be within the noise limits of the town's noise ordinance. All right,
Now, motion.
next item is a motion. I will make the motion. I move that we approve the site plan review by Independence Advocates of Maine Incorporated at Tweed Falls House Expansion, location 2 Hillside Road, tax map 20-3, lot 59. That's it?
With the condition.
With the two conditions, excuse me, two conditions. That prior to the issuance of a building permit, the erosion control plan provided is satisfactory to the town planner or engineer. 2, that the project comply with all other applicable state rules and regulations.
Second.
All in favor? I think it was 100%? Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Phil.
All right, next item on our agenda is an amended site plan review request by Orion UME Edge LLC, who wish to modify the building layout with a minor reconfiguration of the previously approved project located at 111 Park Street, tax map 20-3, C20. Grab the applicant, step up to the mic and tell us a little more about your application.
Evening, everybody.
Thank you. You might just give one to the lady right there.
Okay.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Michael Malinowski. I'm with Allen & Major. We are the civil engineers for the project. We had been back before this board July of last year to approve the project that you see before you. It consists of 2 apartment-style buildings as well as 6 multifamily units that will be used as student housing. Through the process, we received site plan approval through this board. We had also received the site law approval from the state as well in July 2015. As part of the ongoing process with the architect and the owner's representatives, there was an attempt to downsize the square footage of the buildings, make them more efficient, to be more conducive to a modular style construction that would better suit the construction needs of the project. So as part of what you see before you is a slight modification in the footprint to the apartment buildings, which are in this area up here, and then the townhomes, which are in this area here. The multifamilies were previously approved for 2 structures with a total of 24 units. The new process is unchanged. There'll still be 2 multifamily units with 24 individual units. The bedroom count does slightly decrease. It goes from 96 to 93 beds in those 2 units. And there is approximately 1,000 square feet less footprint associated with those 2 apartment buildings. When we kind of move down to the townhomes, the townhomes still 6 structures. It was previously approved. There's still 36 units, and the maximum bed count was 144. That has remained unchanged. There is, however, a slight increase in the square footage of the total aspect of those townhomes. It goes from 23,000 square feet plus or minus to just over 25,000 square feet. One of the other changes that was proposed was in this area here. Initially, it was a maintenance facility with
You need to talk into the microphone.
It was a single maintenance facility with a single unit up above. As a means to better help the maintenance staff, they had requested more space for that maintenance facility. So what we've done is taken the square footage for that maintenance facility and created it all as maintenance and moved the single unit up to adjacent to the intersection of Washbourne Ave. The total bedroom count has a slight decrease overall for the project. The net disturbance remains the same because all the modifications were provided within already previously approved disturbances. So the limits of disturbance on the fringes as well as opposite Orion Drive and the resource areas has remained unchanged. Due to the slight increase in the impervious area, there are 3 under-drain soil filters which collect rainwater. There's one centrally located between the townhomes and the apartments, adjacent to the road. There's one on the opposite side of the road, which looks like kind of a triangle opposite the road, and then there's one in the middle of the townhomes. There was a slight modification to the orifices and the outlet control structures to accommodate that additional square foot of impervious. We still meet our pre versus post stormwater for the project. We did have the plan and some supplemental calculations had gone to Mandy, who had sent a letter over to Evan agreeing with our modifications into the stormwater.
Thank you. Before we turn it over to Evan, I do want to back up just a little bit for the board, just so you understand what we are reviewing this evening. This is a previously approved project. We spent a fair bit of time reviewing that, so what this board is tasked with reviewing tonight are the proposed changes. So Evan has provided a summary. I'm going to ask him to present that in a minute, but just understand that we're not able to go back and open that discussion that happened during the previous approval. So we are more or less limited to what they're presenting tonight for the changes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Evan, you did provide a summary for the
Yes,
board.
yep.
Could you do that?
And Mr. Malinowski has, I think, done a pretty complete job of explaining the changes, and he also submitted letters dated April 15th, going through and giving you some current versus proposed conditions. This is the kind of project that the Code Enforcement Officer, Bill Murphy, would look at and decide whether the changes were significant enough to come back to the board. And in this case, because there is a modest but notable increase in the impervious area, a new structure in the form of a single-family dwelling, which I think will be housing the facilities manager. That's correct. I think that's the intent, at least. It's not limited to that, but that's the intent. That those things meant that the changes were significant enough to come back to you with this proposed amendment, and so it is before you. I think it's important to note, the key staffers to look at this, because the things that we want to look at with respect to this amendment is from Mandy, and she's indicated that she's satisfied with the conclusions reached by Michael's firm as to the increase of stormwater drainage as being within the bounds of the ordinance. Fire Marshal Vaughn wanted to make sure he looked at any new changes in circulation and so forth, the ability to get around buildings and so forth, and he has no issues with it. So, fairly minor changes that raise no issues with staff. The important thing here continues to be that there are a number of conditions and agreements that were attached to this original approval. And so we just want to make sure that as you consider this, and if you decide to, if you do decide to approve the amended plan, that we make very clear that all those conditions and agreements remain in force and have to be in place before the indicated points of the development process, either before building permits are issued or before certificates of occupancy are granted, as the case may be. We've included in your packet a summary of those conditions and agreements. And for those board members who were not on the board during the review of this project, it is worthwhile just making sure you know, even though these are not reopened for consideration tonight. There's been no request by the applicant to amend any of these things, but just so that you know that among the requirements were that there be reciprocal easements between this project and the adjacent Orchard Trails, which is I guess it's in the different corporate entities, but with overlapping ownership. But a reciprocal easement, so that there is a way to get, a couple different ways to get in and out of this project. As people from Orchard Trails may be using the new road, or people from this project will be using Orchard Trails to get into the development.
These are dated as of August 10th.
Yes,
have any of these been updated? Or?
All of them are still in place. Some of them have been executed, but things are in process. Some things have not been executed, so they can't move ahead with the project until they are. And I think that's on their to-do list, as I understand it. So there are those reciprocal agreements. There were traffic mitigation requirements. Most pertinently, they are required to participate in the shuttle bus system and to pay a proportionate share of the cost of that shuttle bus system that runs between downtown Orono and the university campus. The shuttle bus can be easily rerouted, it was determined through that review process. It now goes over to trails that will now swing through this development and back over to the university. And the expectation is that that reduces the vehicle trips from this development and allows it to stay within the limits that we would expect. In addition, the development must pay a fee that can go towards some kind of upgrade. There's some uncertainty as to what the impact, where the greatest need will be and what the best strategy to reduce that impact. A peer review of the development for us that we hired, that you hired and advised you, was that there was a warrant for a turning lane on Washburn to achieve certain better flows. But you recall the board was quite uncertain that that turn lane was a good idea, that there might be better ways. It might go towards a traffic signal. It might go towards enhanced transit. It might go towards some other mitigation technique that, once this is up and running, could be better understood. So they are paying $54,500 as a one-time fee. That's the equivalent of what it would be if they were constructing a right turn lane. And if the town decided that was what was the best thing, then it could build it. It's also making a one-time fee, which is a voluntary offer, which now becomes a condition of the plan, a $13,000 fee, because that would have been if they had been under a Maine DOT traffic movement permit, and Maine DOT did not feel this project triggered that permit requirement. But if they had been, they would have been paying a sum towards the improvement of the roundabout at Rangeley Road, and so they are pitching in what would have been their proportionate share, which comes to $13,000. So those things are in place. They've got the stormwater maintenance agreement that they signed, and the open space agreement, and the covenants to protect all the existing open space that you see on the plan. There'll be an inspection program and so forth, so you can read those things. But I just want to make sure that those of you who didn't have the opportunity to review this a year ago are not looking at this in a vacuum or out of context. So there are a lot of conditions attached to the development, and none of those is altered by these relatively modest changes.
Thank you. Before I open up the public hearing, I'm going to open it up to questions from the board. I had one, just out of curiosity, you applied for state permits as well as what we require in the town.
That's correct.
Did you?
Sorry. Yes.
Everything on record?
Yes, we do, sir.
Did it require any modification, Florida permit, anything you filed with the state?
No, it did not.
Just want to make sure for that condition, if state required anything that the town would suffer.
So I just have two quick questions. One I think I can ask, and the other one I'm going to ask if I can ask, I guess. So the first one is in the letter that was sent to Evan on the 15th of April, underneath the sheet C1 section, it says the number of handicap spaces was reduced from 6 to 7. Should that have been 7 to 6?
Yes, it should have been.
Okay, because I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything when I looked at the sheet. So the second question that I have is, I assume I can ask it because you're amending that part of the sheet, is I noticed that all the handicap spots are at one end of the proposed construction area, but there's no handicap spots on Portland Drive or Pink Lady Terrace. Is there a reason why they're all clustered at one end and not nearer where some of these other apartments would be?
The townhome apartments, based on the modular construction, do not allow for ADA access. So based on the architect's review of the local code, that they are providing sufficient number of ADA units within the apartment style building. Where you see the handicap spots now, the interconnecting walkways are all ADA accessible, so it allows for a clear path of travel up to the facility.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? I'm going to open up the public hearing, and please, any opponents, proponents, step up to the mic, state your name, and what you like to tell us. Anybody? This is your chance. Don't be shy. All right, I'm going to leave the public hearing open then. Any additional questions? The conditions, I guess I would ask, I mean, if we just continue the conditions in place, we could refine that. Just the ones that are remaining, just out of curiosity, out of that two-page list of conditions, have any of those been executed that we don't need to address, or is it just sufficient to?
I think you can just say it all encompassing the things that, because the conditions still apply even if they've been executed. Where that feedback is occurring.
It's usually me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. There you go.
Looks good.
All right.
Yeah, and there will be, at some point, there will be a pre-construction meeting and a review by Bill Murphy and others as to, to show that all these things have been met.
We do have a letter from our town engineer. This is one minor, as far as some of the types of things we reviewed, but rest assured, this board did spend a considerable amount of time with all the other issues, thus the number of conditions that are on this project. So, last call for public comment. All right, I'm going to close the public hearing. Further questions before we open this up to a proposed findings of fact? Just for everyone's benefit, these are only proposed findings of fact that were prepared for this project. The board does not really comment on them. So for the record, proposed findings of fact for the Edge and Orchard Trails, Orion UME Edge LLC, amendment number 1, subdivision and site plan review dated May 18, 2016. Pursuant to Article 6, Section 18-177, Site Plan Review, Article 7, Section 18-210, Subdivision Review, and Section 18-136, Cluster Development. The Orono Code of Ordinances, the Orono Planning Board has considered the application of Orion UME Edge LLC to amend its final subdivision and site plan for a 61-unit cluster development consisting of 2 multifamily structures containing 12 dwelling units per structure for a total of 24 units, 6 single-family attached townhouse structures with 6 units per building for a total of 36 units, and a single-family dwelling and a facilities building plus community and green open space. The amended plan reduces the proposed number of bedrooms in the dwelling units from a maximum of 244 bedrooms to a maximum of 239 bedrooms, which are intended to be rented to students. The development site is located in a commercial 2 district off Park Street and Washburn Place. Based on all evidence presented by the applicant, reviewing agencies, town departments, and the public, the planning board has found the following. Number 1, extent of the amendment. With the proposed amendment does not change the character of the development from the final subdivision and site plan approved by the planning board on July 15, 2015, does not significantly affect previous findings relating to vehicular and pedestrian traffic circulation, utility systems, open space, water resources, and other natural resources, wastewater control and solid waste management, signage, lighting, landscaping, security, or other noise control, does not change the planning board's previous finding with respect to financial and technical capacity. It does not change the planning board's previous finding with respect to conformity with other local and state laws and regulations, including the standards of the Commercial 2 District, the cluster development provisions of Article 5, Section 18-136 of the Land Use Ordinance, the Maine Site Location and Development Act, and the Maine Department of Transportation Traffic Movement Rule. Any issues or concerns with that? None. Number 2, drainage improvements. That the amended plan will increase the impervious area of the development by about 4,400 square feet, or about 3% over the previously approved plan. And based on the materials submitted, the review and comments of the town engineer, the drainage facilities are large enough to accommodate potential runoff from the drainage area and to convey upstream flows generated by a 25-year frequency event without overloading the system in flooding areas not specifically designed to be flooded, and that the rate of flow of stormwater from the development will not exceed the rate of outflow of stormwater from the site prior to the development for 2, 10, and 25-year events, and further, that the effect of the subdivision's drainage on downstream drainage facilities will not overload the existing system. B, the subdivision continues to be planned to protect property from the hazard of flooding. And C, the stormwater management system is subject to the post-construction monitoring requirements of Chapter 13, Article 4 of the Orono Code of Ordinances, and that the developer on the previously approved final subdivision and site plans made appropriate provisions for permanent ownership, maintenance, monitoring, and inspections stormwater facilities. Any issues or concerns with that? Hearing none. Number 3, open space, wildlife habitat, and recreation land. The amended development plan does not alter the previously designated and approved open space areas as required under the cluster development provisions of the Land Use Ordinance. Issues there? Hearing none. Lastly, other findings. That all other findings of the planning board with respect to this development at its meeting of July 15, 2015, and all conditions of approval and requirements pertaining thereto are unchanged and remain in place. Any comments? Very good. Thank you. Very good. Now that that's in the record, it's time for a motion, please.
I'll make a motion. Move that we approve the amendment number 1 to the subdivision plan and site plan for the Orion UME Edge LLC, the Edge at Orchard Trails, location 111 Park Street, tax map 20-1 lot 42 in the commercial 2 zone with the following conditions. That all conditions, should we read this in just saying that all the previous conditions still apply, or is that just assumed? You've said it repeatedly.
I think you should read it in.
Okay. That all conditions attached to the original approval of the Edge at Orchard Trails apartment development remain in force, including all conditions and agreements that must be met or executed before issuance of building permits or certificates of occupancy as appropriate. And number 2, that the signed amended subdivision plan to include conditions of approval that run with the property be recorded within 90 days of approval of the amended plan.
Thank you, Judge. I have a motion. Can I have a second?
Second.
Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Thank you.
I'll just note, Mr. Chair, that they will provide us with the updated plat, and we'll bring it for your signatures.
Okay, thank you. Next up on our agenda, proposed land use ordinance amendment to section 18-138 to allow the renting of an accessory dwelling unit in the accessory structure as well as in the single-family dwelling itself. And those of you that were not able to participate in the comp plan, I think as we started earlier, we're just counting through some of the action items that we identified. And Evan, if you could please give us a summary.
Yes, this is one of the strategies or actions that the comprehensive plan committee recommended and the council accepted in general, not with respect to the details, because the details await an ordinance like this, an ordinance amendment like this, to try to continue to provide choice of housing for people of all stations in life, age, income, and so forth, and B, to continue to be able to integrate student housing into neighborhoods in a way that is not disruptive to those neighborhoods. And one of the things the Comprehensive Plan Committee found through a lot of discussion and hearing from landlords and public forums, the public and so forth, was that often it's the owner-occupied homes that offer a rental opportunity are the ones that cause the least concern if occupied by students. Of course, accessory apartments may be mother-in-laws or lots of other people besides students as well. The town ordinance has provided for some time, some number of years now, long before at least for a while before I got here, accessory apartments. It defines what accessory apartments are, which are, dwelling units of no more than 500 square feet. They have to meet a series of standards. It's got to be in a building that is owner occupied, and the owner has to be a real owner, not a corporation or some surrogate owner. And there are a number of such accessory apartments in Orono now. It's hard to say how many. In theory, they should be registering under our rental registration ordinance, and there are some that are. There are probably more, but they're fairly invisible. And in any case, that's been there. The issue that Mr. Murphy may want to speak to if he wishes, but the issue that came before the Comprehensive Plan Committee was that from time to time the request is for an accessory apartment in an accessory structure. So there might be a detached garage or an outbuilding that served one purpose at some point but could be converted into a small mother-in-law accessory apartment. Now, our ordinance does not allow that. It has to be inside the principal building. And this amendment would allow an accessory apartment to be in an accessory structure as well as in a principal building. It would still have to meet all the same standards. Now, I did want to note, so from that point of view, it is a very simple amendment. It just adds a phrase, or a structure that is accessory to the single-family dwelling unit. That's the underlying portion of this proposed amendment is the only change in what is currently exists. The council, in its discussion, as you know, this is a council decision ultimately, and they're looking for your recommendation, as they must. They are required by ordinance to get your recommendation. But the council always meets in committee to review these, to see if they've got thoughts that should lead to a change in the draft, and then recommends it to you for your input and recommendation. At this point in their discussion, a couple of councilors raised a concern and want your take on it, whether it's a concern of yours, and they may change the proposal accordingly. Their concern, the concern of those one or two councilors, is that a dwelling unit in an accessory structure, I think, is twofold. One is the accessory structure in our built-up part of town may be on a non-conforming lot that is a lot smaller than normal, and the accessory structure may be right at the property line, or the side property line or the rear property line, and if there are now lights and things like that, it simply may be too close and may cause a disturbance to a neighbor. Secondly, that the normal comings and goings of people, if in a accessory structure that's not, if you have to go into the principal building, you might regulate yourself in ways not to disturb, the owner. who's at home. It might come in later at night. There might be just more comings and goings. It might be natural. And they just wonder if I don't think they're saying there shouldn't be units in accessory structures, but maybe that should be only if yard setbacks are met, so that, if you're in a non-conforming situation and the garage is right at the property line, or the building you want to convert is right at the property line, maybe you wouldn't be able to do it, or perhaps that the minimum lot size should be at least X. So if it's not on a 5,000 square foot lot, maybe it has to be, at least 10,000 or 15,000 square feet if you're going to do an accessory structure, just to ensure that there is some space so it can fit in. I don't know if those are concerns or not, but they specifically asked me to pass that concern that was raised onto you for your consideration and advice. So that's the proposal. And Bill may want to speak to some of this, because he's had these requests from time to time.
So I guess before I open up a public hearing, questions for Evan from the board? Any thoughts on the council concerns?
Go ahead, Krista. Go ahead.
I was going to say that if the concern is that we're going to bother the neighbors, then rather than making a minimum lot size, the setbacks should take care of it. And it's quite possible that if you include if you have the standard setbacks, then if it's a tiny lot, you just can't do it. But rather than defining it in terms of lot size, it seems to me that the functional part that matters is the setback.
With this, as I read this, if I have an existing structure that is a shed, I can convert it into an accessory apartment. So if it's 2 feet off the line, a non-conforming 5 foot off the line, because the setback would be 10 feet. So that means that even if you had setbacks, you would potentially now all of a sudden have a livable structure that was 20 feet if everything was conforming from your neighbor, potentially. But, so, I guess that would be my concern of, we're now potentially turning the entire MDR, area into duplexes. Maybe I like that, I don't know.
Well, I think that's, and these are small.
500 square feet, yeah.
500 square feet, no more than 1 bedroom.
They're like efficiencies, pretty much.
Buildings, so they're not actually considered dwelling units for density purposes in our ordinance. They are considered accessory uses. That's the essence of what an accessory apartment is. But you're right, it would be create another living unit on the lot. Right now, they can be in the principal building.
Right.
They just can't be on the lot. So if the garage is attached to the building and you have a second floor, they could do it. If the garage is separated from the building by 5 or 10 feet, they can't do it.
Bill, I wouldn't mind actually hearing from you. I'm curious as to how many requests, because non-conforming, we typically don't want to make it more non-conforming.
Hi.
How many requests do you get?
Bill Murphy calls. I get a couple of requests a year. Generally, it's for an in-law apartment. But I always tell them that the question for us is that this may at some point in the future, nobody lives forever, become a rental. And so I want to make sure that they're aware of the existing setback requirements now for any new structures. If it's an existing structure, that's, if it's an existing structure, that is a detached structure, currently now they can't do it. But without going through a convoluted way of attaching that structure to the main house. Once it's attached to the house, by a breezeway or whatever, it then becomes a part of the house.
Because as a comp plan, we talked about providing these opportunities. This just seemed like one of the options to do that. I'm curious as to really how many current non-conforming situations there are. I would think that would be a small number, but I don't know. I don't want to bother the neighbors.
Well, there are a lot of non-conforming lots. I mean, the median lot size in the MDR district is less than what the required minimum lot size is, so.
Accessory structure.
And then the question is, how many of those have freestanding accessory structures? I don't know the answer to that, but I would guess it's more than a handful. There are probably more dwellings with attached garages than detached garages, but they do exist, and, there are former barns or former large outbuildings and so forth that we're aware of, or sheds. We had one situation where a shed became an accessory apartment, and somehow they figured out how to attach it to the building, just to say it was attached. I think it's more than a handful. I don't think it's an overwhelming number, but I think it's more than a handful. That would be my guess.
I would agree.
Other thoughts on setbacks or?
I just want to clarify that these accessory units have to comply with water and sewage, meeting all laws and code, right?
Yes.
So it's not like you could take your garden shed that doesn't have a toilet in it and say, ooh.
No.
Well, you could push a water and sewer to it, if you wanted to.
Right.
I mean, so you could, say if you could rent that 500 square foot apartment for $1,000 a month, which you couldn't, I don't think, but that you could say, well, that's $12,000 a year. It's going to cost me, I guess you'd do the numbers and figure out if you want to do it. So you could push the water and sewer to it, certainly, but you would have to do that, yeah. It's a good point.
I mean, I thought before was that these types of situations would be self-policing. So I was trying to figure out even, I was thinking of setback, what 10 foot would mean, if it's 5 feet or 10 feet, yeah, I mean, I don't mind.
Very close to the neighbors.
Yeah, no doubt.
And there is a section of the ordinance that allows an accessory structure, a shed, of no more than 1 story to be 5 feet from the rear line.
Other thoughts, Melissa?
Just not gaming the system, but is it conceivable that somebody would want to build an apartment or an in-law suite and not get approval for it because of the lot, but go ahead and ask for approval for a garage or a shed, and then take advantage of this amendment, and then turn that shed a year later into an apartment or...
It's similar to a situation I had 2 weeks ago with a contractor looking to get plans drawn up for a person on the road the school's on.
Westwood.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, and then I told him, I said, at some point it may become an enforcement nightmare for me, or anybody, because you have to be sure that that's not being used as a dwelling, if it's just a garage to anticipating building. So it's something that has to be watched, and that's all you can do.
Well, I think that if somebody came in and built, let's just say that the setback requirement for a shed is 5 feet, for a 1-story shed is 5 feet. So somebody comes in and says, I want to build a permit for a shed within, 400 square foot shed, and it meets the standard. If at some point they could, under the language as it is now, they could make that into an accessory apartment. If, though, you said that, yes, you can have an accessory apartment in an accessory building, but that accessory building must be at least 10 feet or 15 feet from the property line, then they wouldn't be able to. The fact of the existence of the shed wouldn't allow them to convert the use of that shed. So, but right now, you're right, they could do that.
So my thoughts, getting back to the original question that we were tasked with from the council, will the comings and goings cause a disturbance? It seems to me a 500 square foot building, there wouldn't be a whole lot of comings and goings. And indeed, if it was if the owner occupied the same property, I don't have one of these on my property, but if I did, and there was excessive comings and goings, I'm sure my wife would have something to say about that. So indeed, it would be self-policing. I think it may be prudent to have a definitive setback, 10 feet or 15 feet or whatever we think is prudent. But I for one, I just can't foresee a problem with the comings and goings based on the size of the structure.
That was my initial thought when I was reviewing this as well, with the setbacks and some assurances. 5 feet, if you, again, check lights on or music from a dwelling, and you happen to have a neighborhood, that seems a little close, so I think I agree, the setback would be prudent. I don't know exactly what that setback should be.
Yeah, it's something, I think that going to fire safety, the distance between structures, at least principal structures, typically wants to be 20 feet. So if you got 10 feet on one side and 10 feet on the other side, that makes it 20. So that would argue for a 10-foot minimum setback. And you could say minimum 10-foot setback, but at least 20 feet. The total distance between this structure and any other structure on another lot would have to be 20 feet.
Language like that, just other examples in our ordinance.
I'm sorry?
Do we have any other examples of that in our?
We do have some minimum distance requirements between principal structures.
Okay.
And this would not be a principal structure, but it is a living unit. And so, fire and fire spread and that sort of thing has some heightened consideration.
Comparison. Thoughts on that, the 20-foot minimum?
Seems like some level of precedence has been set with that 20-foot.
Yeah, I agree.
Does it give any language from an abutter to disapprove or request for disapproval? Like a neighbor without enemy or?
It would be, no, if you allow this, it's allowed. And it couldn't be disallowed just because the neighbor didn't like it. You got to sort of decide whether this is generally good, in the public interest of public health, safety, and welfare. So the challenge is to come up with standards that will generally be acceptable and not avoid problems. And, some minimum setback requirement, whether it's 10 feet or 15 because if on the 20 feet, you could say at least 10 feet, because you're assuming that the other person might have at least 10 feet. But if the other person could build within 5 feet, a shed, they'd have a right to, now you got a 15-foot distance. So, but...
10 foot would probably suffice, but if we have that...
I mean, if you want to make sure it ought to be 20 feet, you'd say at least 15 feet from the sideline, because somebody could build within 5 feet.
From a fire code perspective, it seems like a good rule of thumb.
Yeah.
What happens to already existing of these if they don't meet that setback requirement now?
Everything's what exists today legally would be grandfathered.
Right. So if we assume that the number of cases would be more than a handful, but not a ton of them.
If it was already an accessory unit.
If it's an already accessory unit, if it's already a dwelling unit.
5 feet and turned it in
Right.
instead of the 10 feet.
Yeah, if there's already an accessory unit, it's already one legally existing.
Even if you don't know about it.
That's a little tricky.
Then the question becomes, is it legally existing? And those are the questions that have to be looked at if we find such a thing.
I mean, to me, that's where this gets a little dicey, which is, these have to be owner occupied in the principal structure, and we say that. But then in 5 or 10 years, someone comes along and buys that house. We get back to the whole student housing thing, where it's almost impossible for code enforcement to enforce that, to say, oh, well, an owner's not living there, or the owner happens to be a student who's also renting out the accessory unit. I mean, it just gets into kind of a mess. But I say all that just as a word of caution. I'm fine with this, with the 10-foot setback, but it is a little dicey.
Or you could just not allow on an accessory structure to take advantage of the 5-foot setback, reduction of 5 feet to the rear line. You could just say that's not available for that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm good if we do that, if we essentially say, you know, what was recommended here by you, which is go with the 10 feet, maybe minimum 20.
So is the wording to be then that the setback has to be 10, but it has to be at least 20 from any other structure? In other words, if the neighbor has a shed,
Yes, that exists at the time of the building permit. That wouldn't stop the neighbor from building a shed within 5 feet if they were within the rights to do that. But at the time of,
well then, are we maybe better off by saying, making it 15 feet setback? That's not such a huge thing. And then that way, the neighbor can have his shed within 5 feet, which he's ordinarily allowed to do.
Thoughts on that? That actually covers.
That's very logical.
I think that makes too much sense.
That seems reasonable. Yeah, so 15 feet, and again, a minimum of 20, we would still have that.
yeah.
I mean, that was a suggestion, setbacks that they came up with to protect neighbors. I didn't really think, this is something we're trying to promote as part of our comp plan discussions. What we came up with, I could not come up with other protections for neighbors, or in my opinion, thought that they were necessary, but I just wanted to ask that question.
Yeah.
Any other,
Well, the only thought I have is the unit is small. You're going to have one person living there, at most two. They don't have room to have a noisy party.
yeah. I mean, parking has to be, can't be in the front of the building, all those kinds of things, so I agree that the comings and goings, I just didn't see that as an issue, but the structure close to the neighbor, if it's non-conforming, that could be an issue, so.
Okay, and then I have a question. I don't know if I'm the only one who stumbled over this, but there is the underlined part that, or a structure that's accessory, okay, and that renting of one and only one dwelling unit shall be permitted. Now, where I got myself hung up here is whether the one and only one is on the lot. In other words, if you already are renting something in your house, can you also have one in an accessory building? Or whether the one and only, okay, all right, or is it, if you have one in your house, you cannot also have one in an accessory unit?
It's up here.
Bill will answer, but I think he's going to answer the same way I would answer.
I think so. My opinion as code officer, they would come to me for permit, and I'd say, no, you only have one accessory unit on your property. That's it.
Okay, but if you're renting a room in your house, okay, can you also rent a room in an accessory unit?
No, you only allow
Rental?
one accessory unit on your property.
But if it's in your house, is it considered an accessory unit?
Yes.
I thought an accessory unit had to be outside.
That's right. Now, no, we're talking about an accessory dwelling unit. An accessory dwelling unit is a dwelling unit that's complete living facility. So it's got a kitchen and a bathroom and living area. It just can't be more than 500 square feet or more than one bedroom. You could have a situation where a single-family property owner is living in a home and just renting a bedroom to somebody.
Okay,
And they also want to have an accessory dwelling unit. They could do that.
okay.
Because there's no, the bedroom is just another occupant of that single-family dwelling.
In their house plus an accessory.
Yeah, but they cannot have more than one accessory dwelling unit on the property.
Thank you, Bill. One question, I just wasn't sure whether this needs to be added, number 5 on the proposed amendment. Do you have to clarify the primary or the principal building is owner occupied? Does that need to be stated?
Good point.
Actually have
Does it
two-
matter?
that maybe doesn't matter, but
That's what, I'm just.
I don't think it probably matters. Thank you. I think it's, as long as the owner is on the premises.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe,
because the owner might.
We might say the property is owner occupied.
Yeah.
The property,
I was
we
gonna
can change that to property. That's a good catch.
I was going to suggest that. Something to keep in mind, though, is when you're talking about the setbacks to properties, these tiny house nation buildings that you've seen on television, someone could want to stick one of those on the back of property and say it's one story and a real tiny place to live in.
So far what I've heard are recommendations, again, 15 feet, very good suggestion with a minimum of 20. Any other additions? I guess this is a public hearing, so I'm going to open that public hearing. I did that a while ago, but I'll invite any comments. I guess going once, going twice. Open and close. That was a quick public hearing. So I guess the next step, again, is it that formal that we need a motion or?
Yes.
Okay, there we go. We need a motion.
Do you want me to make a motion on this?
Try it.
Sure.
Jump right in.
Can I just make it generic, or do I need to read this whole thing in?
No, you can make it generic.
Okay. I move that we approve the proposed amendment to land use ordinance to allow the renting of an accessory dwelling unit in an accessory structure as well as in a single-family home dwelling itself, with one addition, which is that the non-attached accessory units must have a setback of a minimum of 15 feet and be a minimum of 20 feet from structures on other properties.
And then you were going to just add one word perhaps to number 5.
Oh, property. Yeah, number 5, change building to property. The property is owner occupied.
Good, I have a motion, have a second.
Second.
Any further discussion? It's all those in favor? Thank you.
Thank you.
And next up, we have another proposed land use ordinance amendment to section 18-31 definitions, section 18-105 purpose of districts, and section 18-106 subsections E and F, schedule of uses concerning certain land uses and dimensional standards in the commercial 1, commercial 2, and economic development zone districts. You're up again, Evan.
Yes, this again flows directly from the recommendations of the comprehensive plan. And, generally, they're kind of packaged here. Each one is important but relatively small, self-contained proposal. So I'll go through them in order as they're presented in the proposed amendment. First of all, there is a definition clarification or the enhancement of what light industry means. Want to make sure that light industry includes certain industry-related services that support production of goods, such as climate-controlled storage, testing facilities, and packaging services. These are things that we hear about from time to time as needs by producers. And just to make sure that is distinguished from what a wholesale business is, which is separately treated in our ordinance. There are a couple of other very minor, just housekeeping things, but basically this is clarifies what light industry means. Secondly, it now allows, it states within the light industry presently is allowed in the commercial 1 district. The commercial 1 district is up Stillwater Avenue. We have one commercial 1 district. It's where shopping centers are allowed and fast food operations and things like that. Light industry is presently allowed in the C1 district, but only west of I-95. So for example, if the former Ames department store building space in the shopping center at University Mall wanted to get converted to a light industry space, it couldn't do it. Because it's not allowed, for some reason, it's not allowed this side of 95. The comprehensive plan recommends just allowing it throughout the commercial 1 district. So we make a proposed clarification as to the purpose of the commercial 1 district to include light industrial establishments as well as commercial establishments, and that change is also reflected in the chart that's attached. Also, in the purpose of the districts, in the economic development zone, the economic development zone, as you'll recall, exists in part of the main technology park, the part where the Target Technology Center is and the Center SRD building is. It also covers a large area out at exit 191, where the Boy Scout headquarters office is and where the Public Works facility is on the other side. It covers actually a lot of vacant land in that area. The EDZ was created in the late 1990s. There was another kind of district preceded it, so this was a kind of a modification, as I understand it, to reflect the town's desire for business parks that had a campus-like, well-designed, well-landscaped environment. And that continues to be its purpose. But for some reason, it excluded residential uses. You could not have a residential use within an economic development zone. And that goes back to a philosophy that has been held in the past, at least, that there should be kind of a strict separation between homes and office buildings and other enterprises, and that you should reserve such land for those job-creating, tax-paying activities. I think as time has gone on over the years, there's been a sense that at least high-density housing intermixed with in these kinds of business parks can be a plus. It can be a place for residents who are working in some of these places to live, and that it can also be a location for multifamily development in a place that has the infrastructure and so forth that can handle it. And there's also a tax-paying kind of activity. Anyways, as the comprehensive plan committee looked at the EDZ, for example, in the exit 191 area, where the Kelly Road Business Park hypothetically was proposed and some other vacant land, there seemed to be ample opportunity for transitional use. If Delago Pines had wanted to expand, for example, up toward that area, or if somebody wanted to undertake a higher density development in that area, that there was nothing incompatible about that with the idea of an office park or a business park that had a campus-like design and setting. So the proposal is to allow multifamily and single-family attached, that is the higher density versions of residential use in the EDZ with site plan review. So the purpose statement for the EDZ reflects that, and the chart reflects that as well. Finally, dimensional standards. The current commercial 2 district is kind of schizophrenic in that, on the one hand, its purpose is to create sort of a neighborhood scale mixed use set of activities. So commercial buildings are limited in the size that they can be. You can't have a large shopping center or a big department store or a big box store in the C2 district. You can only do that in the commercial 1 district. And it allows housing, and indeed, a lot of the housing, student housing that we're seeing is in the C2 district. But the emphasis is on neighborhood or village scale kinds of activities, even though they may be rather large, like student housing developments. But the lot sizes, the minimum lot sizes suggest that you gotta have a fairly sizable activity. You know, you gotta have 1.5 acres minimum lot size to do something. So if somebody wants to come in with a smaller business or something like that, or a small residential development, just a, 4-family thing, you'd have to have 1.5 acres to do it, minimum lot size. Comprehensive plan said, let's reduce that to 20,000 square feet. Parking and other things may cause the lot size to be larger, but let's not freeze out the smaller scale, neighborhood scale kinds of activities that tend to be uninvited because of the large minimum lot size requirements. So where there's public water, where there's public sewer, this would reduce the minimum lot size to 20,000 square feet. Where you don't, it would still be 60,000 square feet. It would also reduce the frontage from 200 feet to 100 feet. And so that's that. And then also generally, this proposal would allow maximum building height to be 45 feet, not 35 feet. We've seen a lot of that. 45 feet is presently allowed with site plan review, but there's absolutely nothing to speak against 45 feet in public health. We got fire equipment and everything else that can serve that easily. It could go up to 50 feet with site plan review. And we've seen a couple of proposals that are in that area. And the final thing, no, this one doesn't. Yes, it does. The final change with respect to these commercial districts is the C2 district. This is, again, comes directly from the comprehensive plan recommendations, which is it would reduce the bedroom density of multifamily development, of cluster development in the C2 district. Right now, there's a big bonus, density bonus in the C2 district if you cluster and have open space and, meet the design requirements. So you can go up to 8 units per net residential acre. Net residential acre meaning after you subtract out the unbuildable area and the access roads, you can get 8 units per net acre. And that's what every one of these apartment projects has done, basically. They subtract out, multiplied by 8, and that's the number of units they get, which is fine. What we experienced and what we discussed a lot with the comprehensive plan committee, and this was, I guess, really Bill and me and people concerned with stormwater and stuff, traffic, said the 8 units is fine. That's overall by itself moderate density. But it's the fact that every dwelling unit has 4 bedrooms in it. And so now a 200 unit development becomes 800 bedrooms. And each of the bedrooms has a car, and I think it's more than, it puts a lot of stress on systems, and we've seen this repeatedly with these proposed projects. So what this is doing, per the comprehensive plan, is it ties the density to bedrooms. If you're going to cluster in the C2 district, what you get is a maximum of 16 bedrooms per net acre. So if you want to go 8 units per acre, those 8 units are going to be average 2 bedrooms, not 4. If you want to go 4 units per acre, then each of them can be 4 bedrooms. So it wouldn't reduce the number of dwelling units necessarily, but it would reduce the bedrooms, it would reduce the number of people living on a given quantity of land. So that's the proposal, and you'll see that that's in the cluster development section of the ordinance. So this is a package of things, trying to handle a package of things dealing with these commercial districts in one fell swoop.
Yeah. I'm going to open the public hearing and have discussion while we have it open. Evan, just curious, 75 to 70 decibels, just if you could elaborate on that.
Yeah, that's, hang on. Yeah, in the noise ordinance,
Okay.
specifies 70 decibels, so this is making this consistent with the noise ordinance.
It did seem like some housekeeping.
Yeah.
Questions, comments? Those of you, without participating in the comp plan, it's hard to understand how much discussion with the housing issue. We spent 2 and some years, and we really hashed out what opportunities, what the concerns were, so that just, it's hard to say enough about, how much we looked at this issue, but the last point that he talked about, we have a lot of housing units, there's a lot of bedrooms, and that was an issue. And we have an opportunity with our comp plan to try to direct the housing, the previous amendment that we talked about, just look at things a different way. So, again, without as much background, for those of you who didn't go through it, that came right out of a lot of discussion. So, please, by all means, have a question for anybody. Anything?
Am I getting it right? You're talking about having light industrial area that has the ability to have multifamily and single-family housing?
No, not that, it's the economic development zone. The economic development zone is the part of the main technology park, we call it the main technology. The main technology park really started out as 2 separate business parks. The first one was called the Stillwater Ave Exchange Park, and it included where Black Bear Inn is and where the Next Links building is and the white office building, plus a couple of lots that are vacant. And then as you go out down Godfrey Drive toward Bennock Road, that was a second proposed park. As it happened, they were both developed at the same time, but it was a second proposed park, and that was called Maine R&D Park. It's now all called the Maine Technology Park for convenience, but the front half was zoned Commercial 1. The back half, toward Bennock, was zoned Economic Development Zone. The Commercial 1 would allow a whole range of retail. So right now, today in the Commercial 1 district, in that front part, let's say there's a vacant lot, for example, between Black Bear Inn now and the Dysart's convenience store. That vacant lot could become a restaurant. It could become a retail store. Anything allowed in the C1 district, but it could not be light industry because it's on the east side of I-95 and not on the west side of I-95. This would allow the rest of the C1 district to have light industry in it. The economic development zone already allows light industry. So that's not a change. But the only change is the C1. The Comprehensive Plan Committee discussed this in the wake of a couple of different requests or inquiries we had from people who were talking about the need for places for things like packaging and test facilities and those sorts of things. And it was unclear as to whether they'd be allowed in the C1 district in that part of the park. And I think the Comprehensive Plan Committee decided there was no reason why it shouldn't. In fact, it'd probably be very complementary as companies expand out of the incubator at the Target Technology Center, maybe want to do something, some production, and they need some packaging facilities and things like that, it would be a convenient place to be there. I think there must have been some, I don't know why it was excluded back when, but it was very explicit they excluded it. So there's a footnote there. You'll see that footnote's been proposed to be deleted, but the footnote says, it's in the chart where it says use limited to the west side of I-95, it's footnote number 9. That use is referring to light industry.
Just curious, I know, a housekeeping issue too, because it's number 9, but then in the table before that, I wasn't sure if you were placing number 9, or, and then there's a second sheet of footnotes, so. I saw another number 9.
Yeah, there's,
Yeah, the light industry with a footnote 9, and then it jumped 2 footnote sections, so I was just curious.
yeah, it's because there are 2 schedules. The ordinance has a schedule of uses, and that's one chart with its own footnotes, and then there's a schedule of dimensional standards,
Right.
and that has its own footnotes.
I was just jumping
Yeah,
back and forth.
right.
The section 18-146 reference, on that, can you refresh my memory? I know 136 is in here, that was the, what's the second to last
What is 146, what are you referring to?
Oh, in just the number 10 in the
Central service buildings.
I'm just curious.
Oh.
It seemed like good housekeeping, you added references to section 18-1.
Yeah.
6, having to deal with.
Yeah, I have to look at the ordinance, there was something missing, so I added where it's, where essential service buildings are dealt with.
Okay. Just
As a cross-reference.
Okay. Yeah, other questions?
I have one item of concern, which is, if we were to allow high-density residential uses in the EDZ district, does that mean that a large apartment student housing complex could go in on the bottom half of that main target technology center?
They could, but not in the same way, because clustering's not a use allowed in the EDZ district, so, you could have a student apartment project in what is now the business, the technology park, for example, or out by Kelly Road or
Right.
something, you could do that, but,
I guess I would hesitate, for the rest of them, I would hesitate on this one until we maybe thought that through as to what the implications could be. Because I'm assuming that the people with houses on Benneck Road might not be thrilled
right.
if a big student housing complex was built right behind them. Not that I'm against it or for it necessarily, but I think I'd want to look at a map and I'd want to think that all through to make sure that we're not going to create a problem.
Yes, I think that's a good point.
The one off of Kelly Road actually has a variety of uses, you know, some industry, some housing, I guess there's a mix of things, but that would seem to be adequate.
Yeah, I mean,
Tech park.
like, I'm actually for this whole thought, even if it is student housing on a small level in these areas, where there's housing, mixed light industrial use, I think that makes a ton of sense, or commercial, but I just don't want us to create a problem where now all of a sudden, that's not what happens, it turns into, you know,
Yep.
300 unit or 200 unit monster in the middle of a bunch of houses.
So process-wise, Evan, that's a very good point.
Yes.
So passing a recommendation, not that we craft that language tonight, but that we express a concern.
Yeah. Yeah, so I could bring it back to you with more information, or,
Okay.
I mean, it really comes down to what's the allowable density and things like that, and I haven't specified that at this point, so maybe you need to know that before you can recommend on this one.
Yeah, I agree. So we can just continue this?
Yeah, we can continue it, sure, that's a good point.
Sorry about that.
No, not at all.
That's why we do this, that's why we do this. That was something that should have been considered, and I didn't.
I would just like to say, I too am for adding flexibility to the town, because my big mantra is lower taxes, trying to be able to retire here, and the only pathway I see to doing that is by becoming more flexible in town. However, I totally agree we need to balance that with what's right. I mean, I'm a property owner too.
Yeah.
I understand the concerns. I think that'd be a wise move for us to review that a little more in depth.
We have a whole bunch of these items in front of us here, and I'm finding it hard to jump from one to the other.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering whether it would make sense to go through them one at a time instead of jumping in here and there.
Okay, in the ordinances.
Then we could, if, you know, maybe on some of them, like the definition of light industry, if we like that, we could dispose of it and say, okay, we're done with that. We don't have to come back to it.
Okay. Yeah, there's some issues as far as, it seemed like I haven't heard any concern on some of the edits. So, yeah, if we narrow it down, you know, we're not gonna make a motion to approve everything but that clarification, but.
Yeah. Yeah, you could kind of extract the economic development zone piece of this if you wanted to and hold it and pass on everything else if you wanted to. We can go one by one to see if you have issues if you would like. Decide.
Whatever the board wants to
Yep.
do, I'm just trying to understand the process. You weren't saying review, you know, just, I mean, one ordinance per meeting, it's just, you
No, I
know,
was
the
saying-
items within the ordinance,
Yeah.
the proposed ordinance.
Yeah, I mean, we have a number of,
There's a lot to digest here.
and we have a number of proposals that are kind of interrelated, but we
Okay.
can probably do them maybe in the order that they appear here.
Okay, yeah. Would you like to step through? We did kind of bounce around. I'm not sure if anything was left out of this one. We moved on. We can
So
step through.
were we good with the definition of light industry? That's the first one that appears here.
Good question. Did anybody have any issue with the light industry definition?
Wishing.
Right, the 70 decibels, he explained that. Seemed like editorial as the same may be amended from time to time. Or Hayworth, hazardous manufacturing or handling, that just seems to be a good addition in my mind. Any other questions? Next, little more collaboration on light industry.
Anything with smelting in it, it's my thumbs up.
Troublemakers. Any questions on that? That's a fair bit of text there. All right, moving on. C1 district, it mentions adding light industrial, and it updates the old exit number. All right, continuing on. So this EDZ one is the one we're going to wait for more information on.
Correct.
There were, if you looked at the schedule of uses in the dimensional standards, there were quite a few additions. We did talk about, you know, any concerns now on the reduction in lot sizes or the square footage from 60 down to 20. Everybody does that. Any changes with that? Came up in, you know, off-lot sewer and water and on-lot sewer and water. Again, the frontages, 200 down to 100 feet. All right. Again, more frontages on the last page of dimensional standards. There is one from 200 to 150 feet and one from 400 to 200. I mean, just out of curiosity, the 200 to 150, the 400 to 200, and the others are just, just out of curiosity.
You know, industrial uses seem to just, because of the trucking and everything, delivering things, it just, 200 still seems excessive, but the only industrial district we have is on Ayers Island.
Okay.
So it's almost a moot point unless somebody wants to create an industrial district. But it seemed, it seemed that 200 was excessive, but the intensity of in and out in a manufacturing plant can be greater. So, and the need for exits and entrances, so I cut, it's just splitting the difference between if it's got public water and sewer and if it doesn't.
Okay. Any concerns with that? I don't have any better suggestions. Again, similarly, the 400 down to 200, would probably just made an educated guess of what that number should be.
Yeah, that's the same as if, if it's on lot sewer and water, then 200 feet is required across the board there. So.
Very good. Building heights, everybody understand, we've got the 45 feet by matter of right and 50 feet with site plan approval. A couple editorial things you mentioned. I asked a question about 18146. The references in the footnotes, those are good housekeeping issues. Amended section 18-136. Any changes in that, or that was just the last page? Is that the number of bedrooms? Okay, there we go. Correct, that is the change for the 16.
Right.
Any questions on the 16, the number that we came up with? All right, we step through. We're gonna, any other changes so we can focus, Evan, to provide us more information at our next meeting on the EDP issue?
Nope. 18105, paragraph I.
Can I interpret would the guidance be to allow for small scale multifamily development, but, for example, if clustering is not allowed, if you have to have a minimum of 20,000 square foot lot or something like that. I'm trying to think of the standards that, it could be, 4 units per acre, per net acre. That alone is going to probably discourage student housing, larger scale student housing, because you can't get the bedrooms you need. And we could tie that to bedrooms also, by the way, I suppose. Let me think about it. But overall, you're looking to try to make sure that if the EDZ is opened up, given the location of the EDZ on Kelly Road and near Bennock, you want to make sure that it's not going to be something that's going to intrude upon the enjoyment of...
Scale that we've seen.
Yeah. Okay. Let me look at it, come back to you with a proposal.
So I'm going to leave the public hearing open until next time. Good with that? I can't remember leaving public hearing open.
You can do that until the next meeting that you hold. Don't make, yeah. Clarification, I won't, you've kind of settled most of this, but this EDZ stuff, you need, that'll be the focus of the next discussion. I'll hold the whole package for council purposes until we get the EDZ done, so it'll go to them as a package. Okay.
Very good. I guess we're moving on. Item 5, old business, there is none. New business, there is none.
Could I just?
Yeah. The public hearing, well, it's still open before I jump on.
Not about what you're talking about, excuse me, John, you said old business.
How about discussion? So, is that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Please, step right up.
Whatever.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to delay you. I'm Jane DeWitt. I live right at Washburn on Park Street. I was encouraged to come and speak of my concerns after talking with someone at UME, and it's about the traffic in general that's coming right in that area, and around especially at Washburn and the roundabout. I have two big concerns about those places, but before I start those, I want to talk about some miscellaneous things. I have spoken 3 times with Jonathan French at the Maine DOT, and these were on different occasions for different reasons. And I know we're kind of at the mercy of the experts with this roundabout. It's an experiment. But I do have a lot of concerns. And he has admitted that he's done more rural roundabouts than urban, and this is definitely going to be different because of all the rush hour type traffic that's being dealt with, and the students and that sort of thing. And he also said that when there is an accident in a roundabout, it's less severe because traffic is traveling slower, but it is way harder to deal with. Now, one of the things that I had mentioned to him when we first spoke, and he called me because I had sent him one of the cards after the March meeting here, and I said that I had spoken with my brother-in-law in Wisconsin, and he was interested in the information, but he didn't, I won't go into all that. Anyway, I got the information to him, which was, it was a list in Madison, Wisconsin, where the University of Wisconsin is, list of the 10 most accident-prone intersections, and this was back in 2014, and maybe it's not changed, it has or hasn't changed, but I don't know. And of the 10, there were 3 roundabouts, and the top 2, and of the 3 roundabouts, the two of them were the top 2 accident-prone areas. Now, what I'm seeing is that what I can envision, I've been a walker all my life, and especially here at Maine, and as I walk around, I notice a lot of things, and I walk down Rangeley Road, and I happen to wonder how the walking lanes were going to be. Well, when I called UME, they didn't know, and I was kind of appalled at the poor communication. So since I did find out the information about the Wisconsin situation, and I wanted to ask about the walking lanes, which I found out are going to be not as good, not as safe, and not totally complete, but it will be doable. But I asked about a traffic light at Washburn, and his response was, that's Orono's problem. So I'm hoping that you have something in plan to put a light in at Washburn, and I'll get to that later. In case you didn't know, there was discussion, if you remember the big groan when they said they were going to start work in September, and we said, well, you have the summer, why don't you do some, get some out of the way? Well, he said they're going to start in September, but they're going to do some work, which he had said before there was something they could do ahead of the big, the big mess. But he said the bulk of it would be in the spring of 2017. Now, I don't know if you all had heard any of this, whether you knew anything about it. And there was talk about a pedestrian overpass right there, which he sounded like he was a little bit, well, maybe we could do something like that. Well, I don't know whether he knew then, but he said it's way too costly. It would cost more than the whole rest of the roundabout. I don't know if you'd heard anything like that, but it's a little upsetting. But now I'll go back to Washburn. I live right there. When my dog was alive, we were always out there in the driveway or walking around, and the traffic with just when my husband and I first moved in, there wasn't even a Washburn place there. So I've been through many years with the traffic situation there. When my dog and I would be out in the driveway, and just the 160 or so that are in the Washburn place townhouses that are there now, I once timed, every once in a while I would time a car trying to turn left. And this was the worst, and it was an exception, but it was 3.5 minutes for one car to be able to turn left. And that was excessive, but when you only get one car coming out at a time, occasionally two would fit out. This is, and I'm speaking about the rush hours, because this is the big, sometimes there's nothing coming. Sunday morning, you could walk down the street and nothing coming either way, but it's the rush hours that are the big problem. And right there, when there's suddenly going to be the potential of 873 cars, 873 beds at the Avenue, plus the new place, that's way more than, let's see, I have the other ones. I hid in my paper. Orchard Trails has 500 some, and the Grove, what's its new name, has 600 some, and this is, when you add it together, there at Washburn, it will be close to 1,200 cars coming out in that one spot going left. And Jonathan French made the funny comment that, well, the cars coming out of the roundabout will be going at such a speed that there'll be plenty of room in between. And I thought, that's only if you're turning right. If you're turning left, you've got the cars coming in from the right. And so every time, and I stood out there and watched them, every time there was a clearing from the right, there was somebody coming up from the left. So it takes an exceptionally long time for cars to turn left. And if you have, suddenly, when I usually watch, there are often 2, 3, 4, 5 cars waiting. And not everybody's going to have a car, and not everybody's going to have an 8 o'clock class. But there will be, at least 100 more in the morning. And that bus, and that was another thing I found out from talking to Elaine, there is a question of whether they can continue with it, and again, it's money. But the bus will have to wait too, and if the bus is 17th in line, it's going to be a long time. So there is a need for a traffic light. But then, and I'm not sure why I stand on this, but there's going to need to be a traffic light, but if there's a traffic light, what's the point of the slinging cars around a roundabout when they're going to have to come to a stop? And the cars are going to have to come to a stop occasionally anyway because of the street crossing, the pedestrian crossings there, and they just put in 2 new flashing, well, there are 3 in all along Park Street, flashing pedestrian crossing signs. And when you're coming around a roundabout and you're watching who's going to be coming in from Orono direction heading towards Old Town, you're watching who's coming in, and you aren't seeing over here that, the flashing light's going to be on, we're all going to have to stop. And it seems to me that it's opening up a lot more places for accidents, and it's just substituting, and since the whole reason for the roundabout in the first place was asking the state for help for the increase in accidents that happened since the Orchard Trail and the Grove got put in, more cars and students, impetuous, in a hurry students.
What we're committed to do is actually review each project individually. The applicants will come to us and they'll provide experts. If we have questions on issues, we ask our experts questions. So the issue is, if I understand this correct, the roundabout, that's something that we have no control.
Yes, I realize that, right.
Washburn, one thing this board did consider across from your house is, what that situation would be. And without understanding it, I get your concerns. I think we can pass this along to Public Works and planners as we move forward. Because that was an idea that was put forward, but we weren't sure if a solution was right at that time, because they weren't certain. If they see within a really short amount of time, if you add those extra beds and put them at that intersection, you live right across there, so I understand exactly what you're saying. But now, if they figure out that's a problem, then hopefully the people that will make those decisions, because we moved that application on. They met the town standards. We reviewed them as thoroughly as we can, but that issue is still open. So if they figure out that there's a problem, the DOT, the town will be involved, Public Works, there's a whole bunch of people that will be watching that situation. So from a planning board perspective, we can only look at projects, individually. The roundabout, that's not something that we've had any piece of, but the individual projects, we tried to address all your concerns. I agree with you, and that's been identified as a problem area. but people are watching that. So as a planning board, all we can do now is pass along your concerns, but the council is also, my understanding is another opportunity for you to make your concerns known, because people are gonna continue to evaluate that intersection as far as what the solution could be, and hopefully that.
Before all the expense and the chaos and everything of a roundabout.
The roundabout, we can't touch that, so that's more, that's something that probably a really good concern to bring up with the council, but from a planning board perspective.
I didn't know where to go, I just,
We have no control over that, so DOT has made their recommendation, they sit down with the town, we aren't invited to those meetings, so I appreciate your concerns. The Washburn is one that we were directly involved with, but that project up on the wall, we have not touched that. Is that something, even from a planning perspective, that?
Well, it's, the roundabout is the product of decisions by the Maine Department of Transportation and the Bangor Area Comprehensive Transportation Program. Town of Orono is represented on that, on BACTS, as it's called, BACTS. But in the end, it's a Maine Department of Transportation project. They determine what the best solution would be and how it needed to be funded, and now they're designing it, and this was an iteration from several months ago. But you're right, the planning board's not about Washburn intersection, probably because of your testimony at the time of one of the projects of the Edge.
I was surprised to see that other exit onto Orchard Trail on.
No, that's not an exit. It's a potential. It's an interconnection. But Washburn.
That wasn't floated before, and I figured they're all going to be going out Washburn as well.
It's always been part of the project from the beginning. But there is, a modest sum, $54,000, that the Edge will be paying toward whatever might need to be done, especially in the vicinity of Washburn and Park. And that'd be only a fraction of the cost of signalization, but if signalization is required, as it may be, the warrants might be there for it. Maine DOT determined that the warrants were not met for a signal at Washburn when the avenue came in. And we really questioned that. We pushed them hard, and they said that the warrants were not met, and they don't like traffic signals on their main highways, because traffic signals are friction points, and they say cause more accidents and not less in the end. But if certain warrants are met, delay warrants and accidents and so forth, then, but they said they weren't. And then they did not choose to take jurisdiction over the Edge project for reasons that I don't fully understand. But they didn't. It was due to the planning board's efforts that the Edge, which is a much smaller project than the others, put up $54,000 to be contributed. A right-hand turn lane would, according to the analysis of our peer reviewer, would lessen the delays at Washburn.
Where are we going to go, around the island?
Sufficiently well, because the right turn lane from Washburn going north, going towards Old Town, that there was enough traffic during the peak hours in that direction, that if you had a right turning lane off of Washburn onto Park Street, according to our peer reviewer, that would reduce the weight at Washburn enough to warrant requiring that right turn lane. You recall that both staff and planning board looked at that and said, well, right turn lane might be a good thing, it might not be, but it's going to widen that intersection. That's going to make it harder for pedestrians, and we don't know if that's the best solution. A signal might be a better solution. Or increased transit might be better. We don't know what it is. So they put in the money that would be equal to what would be necessary for a right-hand turn lane from Washburn onto Park. But it is in the town, that is in the town's hands as to how to use that money. And I beg to differ with the gentleman who said that's the town's problem on Signal Washburn Place, because that is Route 2. The town could not go put a signal on of its own choice. Maine DOT would have to is the decision maker on that, so.
Right, no, that's, no, he said, he didn't know about the walkways. So I knew that I didn't even need to bother him about the light, but 90% of the time, those students are turning left to go to the university. They aren't gonna go around the island. What they do, what I've heard some people farther down say, which is what happens where they go and turn at Crosby, so instead of waiting to turn left, they go and circle around at Crosby, is they'll go down and go around the Legion, through the Legion parking lot, so they can just turn right on, they can do two rights, you know, or left and right and left, right.
Pass concerns along?
Yes, and that's why I'm here.
Just to confirm, Evan, she's brought her concerns, I appreciate.
Somebody should be there from day one next semester.
Opportunities for her to, just engage the council, perhaps DOT, correspondence?
Yeah, I mean, it's the big transportation decision makers.
Right.
On a route like Route 2, which is an arterial, it's not a local road, it's an arterial, and the town is responsible for maintaining it because it's within the so-called urban compact area, but decisions about that kind of construction, and from signals to intersection modifications, to road widenings, to lanes and all roundabout, it rests jointly with the Bangor Area Comprehensive Transportation Program, that's BACS, which is the so-called Metropolitan Planning Organization for transportation purposes, and Maine DOT. Now, Rob Yerxa, our Public Works Director, is our representative to the BACS Board of Directors. And he is really the point of contact, although in the end, there's usually local money involved, which is a council decision, you know, so.
So, this board, understand your concerns, that is why we focus quite a bit of attention on that discussion. But we can't do anything more other than to pass along your concerns to our Public Works Director. So this is now a matter of record, your discussion here. I would encourage you to, speak to council. Rob Yerxa is Public Works Director, but we can't really help you too much on
And when you say
that
speak to,
because we've already approved.
no, I understand that. When you say speak to council, who am I?
There's an opportunity.
Yeah, it would be through Sophie Wilson. It would be through town it would be, Sophie is the person who gets things onto the council agenda. Okay. She meets with the chair of the council.
Town manager.
And the town manager would be if you want to get to council, it would be through Sophie.
Oh, okay. And I'll just mention this also, because this all was happening as I was out walking. And again, this is nothing you can do, but I'm just mentioning it. When I went around the corner at the bank to head back home up the street, it was at a time of day when the sun was coming pretty much level. And that's going to change different times of the day, different times of the year. And it totally washed out the lights that were on the pedestrian crossing sign. And there are, I don't know, a number of them that flash and go across. They made them white.
Right, our Public Works Director has been quite engaged because as part of our comp plan, you heard that discussion. We need to make this town walkable, bikeable, all forms of transportation. So any of those types of concerns?
Talk to him?
Again, I bring that up to Public Works.
Well, I did, through Scott Scripture was the one who passed things on, and Rob Yerxa said, no, it can't be done. My suggestion was, amongst the lights that flash across there, if you just put in one red light that you could see when the light is bright on a sunny day and the sun is coming this way across.
I appreciate your concern, but
the woman in the stroller, with the stroller who was crossing the street there, almost got, two cars just went, if a policeman had been there, he'd have stopped them. I don't know how he'd stop two at once, but it was bad.
Is as a matter of record, Evan, can you pass along concerns? It has been reported.
I will. Yep.
Thank you.
It has been reported to Bob Jerks, but it, the answer wouldn't have helped the woman if she'd been here, so, anyway, yeah, thank you.
You sticking through the meeting.
Check on
All right, we do have one more item for discussion. I would like to publicly acknowledge, this is Ruth's last meeting. Ruth has worked for the town, what, 3 or 4 years now, I think?
29.
Decades.
29, 3, 4, 29. I've had the great pleasure of working with Ruth for, I don't even know, 8, 9 years. I can't even keep track anymore, but does a stellar job, makes our job quite easy. I've had a good time working with her. So, thank you. I appreciate your...
You can pick on somebody else now.
Yeah, I'll pick on somebody else, right? But I appreciate your efforts for the board and service to the town, so that's on record.
I still want to know who approved it, because that is,
Somebody higher than me.
Good luck in your next adventure.
Thank you.
Could I, two small things?
Small thing.
One is, I have the card, I meant to bring it up to Mark Kittredge,
Yeah.
thanking him for his service, and I want the opportunity for you all to sign it, so I will run down and get it and bring it up. Secondly, the June meeting, at this point, there are no projects. What we have would be, the council looked at and has passed on and referred another amendment dealing with lodging, travelers accommodations, which is one of the changes from the comprehensive plan, and then you'd have this one that you tabled, so there'd be those two things in June, if you want to have a June meeting. I guess I need to find out, huh?
I think we could use a month off. That doesn't seem...
Yeah, I may not be at the July, I may have trouble in the July meeting.
I won't be at the June meeting.
Okay, we're trying to find out June, July, August, what your schedules are, so that we can determine whether we got a quorum on things.
I'm not here in June. No, no.
Okay. Are others here in June?
I'm here in June.
I'm here the 3rd week of June, yes.
Okay, Judd?
I think so.
What, looking out a little farther, any projects in the pipeline that...
There may be, people are always talking with us,
Yeah.
and so it's never entirely sure. I know that there is some discussion of a residential development in town. I don't know where they are. They've not, their engineers talked to us, the developers talked to us. We know they've acquired the land, we know they've done some survey work, some habitat surveys and things like that. So I know that's going to be coming. It could not be in for the June meeting, it could be, they could still make it into the July meeting, right, Ruth? 6 weeks, they need 6 weeks. But we haven't heard anything, so I'm somewhat doubtful it'd be July. I wouldn't be surprised if it was August. So there are a couple, and there's a couple of smaller things that people have talked to us about. So I think there'll be some stuff coming forward.
Evan, you said you would not be here on July 20th?
July 20th may be problematical. I might be able to work things around. If there's, I will always accommodate AU and B, people who are trying to get projects done because they've got schedules and deadlines and construction seasons are short. So,
I have nothing in my July calendar at this point, so I'm not available in June and in July.
and then August 24th. Oh, I'm sorry, August 17th.
17th, I'm here, yeah.
Okay, it sounds like we can get a quorum on any of those months, so let me see where things stand.
For 2 ordinances, I just one in a piece. What's that? Yeah. I'm just wondering, I'm not here, but it's up to you. Do you want to push off a meeting?
If it was July, we might want to push it to the, let me find out my schedule, but I might propose to you that we push it to the, depending on my travel schedule, move it to the 27th.
If we're going to come in and say there's no other, public hearings in July, if we had more ordinances to review, we could actually come in and get some things done.
Yeah.
Rather than one and just the tail
Right.
end of one
Yeah.
day.
I think that's fine. I think some of these smaller, you've got this travelers accommodations coming in.
Right.
Then we're gonna start jumping into bigger things. The next thing that I've been asked to work on is this Main Street Overlay District, which is a more major thing. It's gonna involve some significant public involvement, and so that's not gonna be ready for formal review for some time, for several months, so.
Like, no June, and then July, figure out if it's the
20th or the
current day
27th,
or-
yeah, okay. And, yeah, okay.
All right.
We'll keep you apprised as best I can without Ruth here.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You don't sound sorry.
All right, last item is adjournment. Motion.
Can I run down and get Mark's card so you can sign it?
Yes.
I'll be right back.
But you can make your motion.
Motion?
Second.
There we go, motion second. Discussion, all those in favor? All right.
So no June meeting, good.
I think it's mean to say the money.
Mike's off, now I know why.
No, I gotta go shut them off.
We'll see, I just don't want to.
Oh, you're gonna be done. Well, just
Is he the person back there?
No, safe to talk.
Thank you. Said I'm done.
Yeah, he said that there was time.
As much as I like you all, I'm sorry, I don't want to stay for any more meetings. I won't miss them.
You'll be looking up on the website to read the minutes and stuff.
Actually, the town of Orono is on my Facebook account, so I'll know what's going on. And my husband's still here. Wow.